Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, I'm excited to be covering the essential topic of interviewing and content marketing through podcasts. Today's influencer guest is Heather Parady, the host of Unconventional Leaders podcast based out of Augusta in Georgia. Heather's show airs sort of 3 times a week, and she shares stories of leaders from all over the world who build great things basically from the ground up. A little bit of a pitch off script here. I'm super excited to be reciprocating on Heather's show as well, coming out later this month, where hopefully I can share some of my entrepreneur stories as well. Heather's show's mission is really to empower first generation self-starters to step up, use their voice, and make an impact to the world. Heather, and if you've been on LinkedIn at all, at anything, you should have seen Heather's recently started a daily LinkedIn video series called LinkedIn Leaders. It's an immense sort of session with these 10-minute blocks, really compact, really full of high-value information from real, strong contributors. So if you're missing that, check out Heather on LinkedIn, and obviously hope that you can, comment on that and get some value out of those. And that show's objective is really to provide personable networking opportunities for both guests and viewers. So as we get started, I must say this, I think this is the most pressure I've been on under the open mic, Heather, if I'm being totally honest, as an interviewer. Heather's got a master's degree in counseling as an expert in interview techniques. I'm the interviewer here today, so I'm certainly under the spotlight, not literally just with the production lights here. I'm under the spotlight, and I hope you're going to go kind on me today. Ultimately we can get through this. But Heather, as I said, Heather's a master's in counseling as an expert in interview techniques, and she uses a lot of these skills to connect with people. So I need to be on point for sure today. Welcome to the show, Heather. It's awesome to have you here.
Mike, I'm so honored. And if it makes you feel better, I'm intimidated because your setup is amazing. You have the coolest studio I've ever seen. So likewise, I'm intimidated by your studio.
No, absolutely. Well, let's fumble through this together, both as amateurs, me as an interviewer, you as a studio, or whatever we call it. Let's get into it. Before I go back on there, I just want to make sure that you guys have got access to see Heather's content. It's absolutely amazing. You can connect with Heather on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Heather Parady, and that's HEATHER PARADY. Facebook is heather.parady after the facebook.com usual extension. And please visit Heather's website. It's an amazing personal brand website, heatherparady.com. That's a pretty awesome site that you can get a lot more information on. But before we kick off and get into the topical subject of interviewing and content marketing through podcasts, what I actually want to do is just share a little bit about Heather's journey to build that up before she comes in and tells us a little bit more about herself. Heather has a master's degree, as I've mentioned earlier, from Central Arkansas on mental health counseling and a bachelor's degree in psychology. She's the founder and board director of New Eyes, a nonprofit that provides support and resources for women in Central Arkansas working in the sex industry. Heather also owns Content Lab. It's a membership site for content creators, who really want to provide more authentic and consistent online content that connects with their audience. So again, Heather, I've probably not done anywhere near the justice of your experience and expertise here. So just tell us, before we get into the question, just tell us a little bit more about you. What's that journey look like? How did you end up here today? What's the highs? What's the lows? I'd love to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, so I don't know how I ended up here. I think all the time, like, what am I doing? Like, this makes no sense because, I spent, years in school to become a therapist. And here I am talking to you and podcasting and putting out content. Like, what's going on? So I ask myself that a lot, but I think it just boils down to, I just love connecting with people. People are just so cool. And what I love about humankind is that we're all so alike and all so different all at the same time. At our core, we have this fundamental need to be seen and be heard and be loved. And yet we're also diverse within our skill sets and our talents and our abilities and our interests. And so it's just a fascinating subject. So I went to school to be a nurse, took one psychology class, and I was leaned forward the whole time, asked a million questions as one of those people. And I knew that that's what I needed to go into, was just studying, human behavior. So did that, came out and got bit by this bug that I call the entrepreneurial bug. And it bit me hard. And I just fell in love with the online space. So I was kind of at this crossroads because I'm like, okay, I'm a trained therapist. I need to be sitting in a room talking with people, but I really want to get online and put out content and talk to you and build something. So I kind of just smushed the two together, and I've just been kind of making my own life and path over the past couple of years, which looks like hosting a couple of shows, providing as much value and content as I can in the form of self-development and leadership topics, and trying to get a message out there that really changed my life personally, and I think has the power to help other people. And so I do that full time, and it's been a very up and down journey, sometimes still questioning myself. And, it's a really fun life being an entrepreneur and building your own thing, but it's also scary as hell. And
Absolutely. I can vouch for that all the way.
So that's me.
No, and my entrepreneurial career started in 1994. Can you believe that's 25?
Wow.
Celebrating my 25th anniversary as an entrepreneur. So my joke is I've not had a job for 25 years, but like you, I get to do what I do. I speak on the stage. I produce podcasts. I've got my own agency. I'm linked to a venture capital arm, and I do a lot of exec stuff as well. And I just want to make a difference and try and be as authentic as I can and share some of those experiences to stop other people making mistakes. And I think that's what I love about it. And I know you say you get bitten by it and bitten by it hard, and I listen. These alarm bells going off in me, thinking, that's me. I remember when that happened. And it's like a venomous poison that replaces the blood in the veins. But
literally.
But it is. But, couple of quick questions before we get into it. What's the biggest high? What's the biggest low?
The biggest
high career so far, yeah.
Yeah, the biggest high is definitely the time freedom. Everybody always highlights like, oh, you're going to make all kinds of money and you're going to be rich. Well, it takes a good minute for you to learn how to build some really solid income, that surpasses your expenses. But I think what's more important to talk about within the entrepreneurial space is the time freedom, because although I work very hard and very long hours, yesterday my daughter had to get a shot, and I had the option to go with her and hold her while she got that shot.
And that's priceless, isn't it?
Exactly. And so I would say the high is definitely the freedom. As long as I have Wi-Fi, I can work anywhere,
Absolutely.
Now, if there's no Wi-Fi, that goes into my low. But the low, I think, is the loneliness of it. I'm very social and I love people. And although I connect with people all over all the time, there's nothing that really beats being in a room with a human being and being a solopreneur, working with people, digitally. I miss being around people a lot. So hopefully, a few years down the road, I can free myself even from the laptop life and not have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, but there's always a balance, isn't there? There's that pro, there's that con and things like that. But I think if you do what you love and you can deliver value and you can get that balance, I always look at it. What's the price to pay for that, whatever that low or sacrifice is, and does the other one balance the other one out? And if it does, then, you go and follow your passion and you do what you love. So thanks for sharing that journey. It's absolutely amazing. And congratulations as well, especially on the LinkedIn Leaders, a little mini series as well. It's such unique, it's such different, and what I love about it is its consistency. And I noticed you interviewed Pardeep the other day as well, Pardeep Sanger. I interviewed Pardeep on the open mic a few weeks ago. He's a cracking fella, and really got a lot of time for Pardeep and really enjoyed that one as well. Because obviously I'd got into a deep dive with Pardeep about what he does in the male entrepreneur, and then to see that from a different angle for how you dealt with it in that environment was awesome. So congratulations on that. It was well done.
Thank you. He's a really cool guy, and I love his message.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk today about interviewing and content marketing through podcasts. We're both podcast hosts. We're both content marketers and things like that. But, getting into really the first sort of question really, Heather, is, consistency and the importance of systems and processes. Just tell us what your view is around that and why that is so important.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest misconception that we have, even if it's unconsciously, is that our relationships online are different than the ones we have in person. And we've got to switch that dialogue to understand that what we're building online has the same principles as if we were building something in person. So if I were going to say, Mike, listen, every Tuesday, I'm going to bring you an apple pie. I'm Southern. I like apple pie. Okay. And I bring you apple pie for 6 months on Tuesday. And then one day I just stop showing up.
Yeah.
And a few weeks later, I show up with an apple pie and I act like nothing's wrong, but you're like, where were you? I thought I could trust you with this pie thing. We understand that with, a silly example like that of in person, but for some reason as content marketers, we think it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to promise you this. I'm going to show up for you. I'm going to give you value, but then sometimes not. And so what happens there is there's a strained relationship where people don't know if they can trust you. And if the foundation of all relationships is trust. You have to build trust with people. And a key part of that is consistency.
That's an amazing point. And, throughout all the podcasts that I do, Heather, I sometimes, I regularly say, the stuff that whether the guest influencers like you could sell, it's not necessarily new. It's just going sometimes back to basics and recognizing human behavior, isn't it? And that example there, I love the example of the apple pie. It's right. And we shouldn't choose whether we turn up or not. If we've built that tribe and we've made that promise, that message, then like you say, we should turn up and deliver because, that trust goes, everything goes. And all the hard work you put into it is something quickly eroded away, isn't it? So that's such a simple message, and equal to 50, 100 times more valuable than the simplicity that it creates. So thanks for sharing that. Now, we talk about impact focus and mission-driven focuses within your message. You talk about, and I know you talk about this. That's what really truly connects. So just explain what you mean a little bit more around that, Heather, and maybe explain that and then sort of go a bit deeper into it if you could.
Sure. Well, I think it honestly, it links into the consistency piece. And this is how I think we struggle with consistency and showing up and putting our message out there because we're so worried about it being imperfect. But we don't understand that a lot of times our imperfection is what connects us.
Yeah.
You like people because you connect with them on a human level and you feel like that you can be messy and yourself and blah, that builds that trust again. But for some reason and as leaders, we struggle, and I guess as human beings, of what are people going to think and et cetera. And so I think the key to that is really focusing in on the person you're trying to serve. Because when you can get your eyeballs off yourself and realize that you're here for a bigger mission and a bigger this, like you would do anything for those you love, your family. You don't care how you look if it means it's going to benefit them. We have to love our audience that same way, even if we don't personally know them. Become so obsessed and impact focused and driven to help them that we're willing to be a little imperfect, mess up sometimes, and that falls into consistency. That's going to help you become more consistent. There's this psychologist that I love. His name is Alfred Adler, and his idea was that we're all born with this sense of inferiority, and that we all struggle with something. We all feel like that there's something wrong with us, and we're all kind of in life trying to overcompensate for that. I grew up poor, so I'm going to try to make a ton of money to overcompensate for that feeling of unworthiness in that area. Maybe I grew up with a disability, so I'm going to work really hard to, have everybody like me and be funny or whatever, so I can overcompensate for that. So his idea was that we're constantly trying to overcompensate for our own feelings of unworthiness. But in order to overcome that, the best thing we can do is to become impact focused and look at societal good. That's what he called it. And I love that. Yeah. And I apply that to content marketing a lot, because when you can look at, again, that person you're trying to serve, it gets your eyes off of your own self-doubt and inadequacy and fear, because we all have it. All of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's amazing. Quick question, slightly off script, Heather, but Alfred Adler, is he published at all? Does he have books that we could check out, or is he searchable on Amazon or something?
He's an old school psychologist back in the Freud days. So he has tons of books. He's passed away by now, but he's, he was just a contributor to the psychology world.
No, that's awesome. And I mean, to be fair, we call them the OGs, not the original gangsters, but the originals. Whether it's Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, Maxwell Maltz, George S. Clason. So I'm going to go and certainly check out Alfred Adler as well. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And it does make sense on that connectivity to, or the link into the consistency for sure. So our specialist or joint self-interest of podcasting here, I know why I do that. I believe it's a public service. I believe I'm serving the audience. I'm introducing my audience to awesome people like yourself and a wider topic. It naturally builds my own personal brand, and also to a degree, we do pick business up off podcasters and say, hey, I love your message, Michael. I love this, whatever. And then you come in. But that's not the main reason for me. My main reason is it's just part of what we do. It keeps me sharp. But ultimately, if I am being totally honest as well, I get to be coached by some of the world's greatest speakers. Yes. Like yourself, I learned so much of yourself. I learned so much of all the guests. So I get like free training type of thing in these environments. So a little bit selfish, but ultimately it's to serve my audience and introduce them to a wider content and, keep it authentic. But that's my view. But when it comes to podcasting from your side, Heather, why did you get into it? What's it mean to you? And why is it so important? And I suppose, why should the audience maybe consider getting into it if they're not already there?
Yeah. So I'm sure you get asked this a lot, Mike, is like, what's the right content strategy? What should I do? Yeah. Should I start a YouTube channel? Should I blog? Should I podcast? And I think this comes down to self-awareness of understanding what comes really natural for you. So writing does not come natural for me. I misspell everything and my eyes cross and I just end up binge eating because it stresses me out so much. So, but getting on a video call with you and talking comes so much more natural. So I leaned into podcasting because it was a strength. It was something I enjoyed. So I think you really need to be aware of what comes natural to you. But I'm like you, it's literally changed my life. And I don't say that lightly. No. It literally has.
Sincerely.
This is the coolest opportunity. And what I love about voice and video, and I'm grateful that you do video too, a lot of podcasters don't, is because again, it adds in that human element where I can hear your voice, I can see your face, I can connect with you. And our listeners, they know us. It's a very intimate.
It is.
And it's like none other. I think everybody should start a podcast if it's their strength, of course, but I'm a fan. I love it.
Absolutely. And for us, it's one of my favorite parts of what I do throughout the week. I've got about 4 or 5 different jobs in or roles. I don't really call it a job. I do what I love, but podcasting is one of my favorite things that I do every week. It's just an amazing thing. And we've got such an accelerated push on it that, we've actually moved more of the time of us to make sure that we do more awesome interviews with people like yourself and other great influencers. So quick tip, if somebody wants to get into podcasting, you're saying here, is that what yourself natural? Don't force yourself into it. But if you connect on and resonate with that, then it's a great medium to get started. That's the overall message there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So here's where I'm going to crawl under the table with embarrassment when it comes to interviewing. You got psychology, you get interviewing. I've got a very rough, authentic style. I apologize. I'm pretty direct.
I like it.
I'm pretty direct. I don't try and be what I call the plastic population of trying to be the next Gary Vee or the next thing. That's just me. This is who I am. This is what I do. You either like it, you connect with it, you don't. I'd like to think over 25 years I'm reasonably knowledgeable, but that's just what I am. And I love to do interviews and I love to find out about people. But, obviously, I'm sort of enviable and I'm looking up at what you do, from the psychology side. Tell me about interviewing. What's the best way to interview somebody? What's the best technique? What's your view on it? And, how should people, maybe get, approach that?
Well, they should do exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. Wow.
You just said, I'm just being myself and I'm just being me. And that's the most plastic, whatever, Heather, answer that I could give you, but it's so true. People can sniff out inauthenticity and fakeness in a heartbeat. And I think it's less about, performance and more about connection. And the only way you can connect, again, is just being yourself. Sometimes I feel pressured that, like, Heather, you need to be more professional. You need to sit up straight and wear dangly earrings and talk like this. You know what I mean? But it's not me. I wear like Converse shoes and, have my hair in a ponytail and just talk because that's who I am. And I think with interviewing, what's most important is showing up, just like you said, and listening really intently and hearing what's being said underneath what's being said. If you really want to dig in, and I love this in counseling, what they would teach us is tell me a little more.
Yeah.
Or rephrasing what was just said and kind of pausing and waiting because then you have that person dig in just a little bit deeper. Because often what we say is not necessarily what we mean. And there's often something just a little bit deeper there. And of course, it's dependent on your goals for podcasting. If you have a business podcast about email marketing, you don't care about what their mommy and daddy said when they were 5. You just want, give me the marketing tips, man. So it depends on your goals. But I think, connection there, and people know when they're being heard. They know when they're being listened to. You can't fake that. And so again, what you said earlier, you were on point. Yeah. Going back to just the basics of humanity, be a decent person and listen.
Absolutely.
Look at people. It's not hard, but we get so focused on our performance and delivering some beautiful package that we can say is professional, as opposed to saying, screw all that. Let me connect with Mike, the human sitting in front of me, and just have a real freaking conversation.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. And, I think that when it goes to, whether it's on video, on interview, or in face-to-face, people think they've got to put this front on, and they don't. Just be yourself. There's a great saying by Ryan Levesque, and he says, look, you don't have to be perfect. You just got to get going and get out there. And if you're delivering value, you're not for everybody. You, me, we've all got haters, trolls, or, people who just say, hey, I just don't get it. That's fine. Stop trying to cater that. Go and continue with your message and deliver. And that's great advice. And I'll be practicing extra on drilling down and pausing and listening and going from there. So
I think you're awesome at it. So no worries.
Oh, well, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it. And so talk to me about creating work with the intention of impact over perfection. And I know I just touched on the Ryan Levesque thing, but just take that down a couple of notches for me. Give me some examples how you would approach that. And maybe how your listeners could approach that, in different spaces, or,
of creating an imperfection.
Yeah. Creating work with the intention of impact over perfection type of thing.
Yeah. So how many people listening have ever wrote something and never hit publish? They painted something and never showed it. How many times did they record something and never share it? I mean, I have too, Mike. I'm not immune to this. I have a folder of things I've created that I haven't put out in the world. And again, it's that hesitancy, because we think, what happens if this is rejected? What happens if this isn't good enough? Because our work is us, and it's personal. It is a personal thing. And so again, the only way I've been able to overcome it in my own life, and I think it's a good tactic for most people, is really focusing on what's the alternative if I don't. What if I don't? There's a group of people who's going to resonate with your message, Mike, who won't resonate with mine, and vice versa. Absolutely. Again, it goes back to that uniqueness. So we have people who want to hear from you. We do, and they need to hear your message, but we're being selfish when we get caught up on how perfect we look or not, because people don't give, They don't. Absolutely. They don't. No, they don't hear it. They don't see it. You do. It's called the spotlight effect in social psychology, where you think that the spotlight is on you, and so does Sam down the road, and so does Jane down the road, and everybody's thinking that the spotlight's on them and worried about what each other thinks. So we're all immobile and not doing anything.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that one piece that you hold back could help somebody else. So, to a degree, you could even argue and, look yourself straight in the mirror. If you're listening to this podcast and you've got that folder of quality or value, look past your own, critique or whatever it would be. That one piece of content that you could put out there could change somebody's life. And that's really what it's about. And, at the end of the day, as Heather said, I'm not for everybody. Heather's not for everybody. Gary Vee's not for everybody. Go back to the old school, Jim Rohn, Ziegler's, personally, no disrespect to Brian Tracy, he's awesome. I just don't connect with Brian. Others I do, and vice versa. So it doesn't matter if you're A-list, B-list, or you're just getting started or anything like that. Just get out there, keep the focus on your audience, get your value out there, and you should be great. But no, that's a great way, and I love the spotlight effect analogy, Heather. That is fantastic, and I'm certainly looking forward to sort of focusing on that. Because like you, I maybe don't have a folder, but I've probably got 4 or 5 little mini-series where it's about finance, and I'm thinking, what do the finance professionals think? They're more qualified than me. Will they pick it apart? But that finance could help somebody raise capital or stop them going down the wrong way and making a wrong investment. So I think next week I'm going to publish that and get it out there.
I will tell you, Seth Godin, if you don't follow, do you know Seth Godin? Yeah. He's given me so much bravery in my own life. His work, if anyone listening struggles with this, pick up something by Seth Godin, because he really breaks down the philosophy behind delivering your work, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with us. He's one of the original, he's awesome, the quality and the impact. So, Heather, I appreciate your time today. The simplicity, but the value, is just awesome. So, thank you very much. The value you've delivered is unbelievable. I hope I can at least reciprocate some value back to you in your show. I'm not quite sure I could be at your level, but I would certainly try hard. I certainly appreciate you being on the show. And as we sort of start to wrap up here as the final session, when we look about interviewing, content marketing, podcasts, all the things that we've talked about, if you were to compact those down, and I know it's always sometimes a little bit offensive to say, hey, take it all out and just give me the bones. But I always like to do a recap at the end of the show for the skim readers or the skim listeners. They always go to the end of the show and say, what's the meat and, what's the real value? What's the 3 pro tips that you could maybe give us if I'm either wanting to get started or get improved, the audience's position, with this subject? What would be the 3 things that you would focus on or ask them to focus on?
Number 1, consistency. Show the same respect to people online that you show in person. They're no different. There's still a human being behind that screen, behind that phone. It's a human. So be consistent, build trust. Number 2, people connect with imperfection. Your story, the thing that you think disqualifies you, the thing that you think is going to keep you back is actually going to be the thing that propels you forward and builds your audience, because people want to hear truth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's 2. Number 3, I can't count. Deliver your work, hit publish, start. There's never a perfect time. You're always going to fail and mess up no matter what. Some people keep pushing forward anyway, and some people let it keep them immobile. So start.
Absolutely. And, simple messages, immensely impactful. Sit and look at the words on the page. Don't do anything. Take action. Go make it happen. Yep. Heather, as I say, I really, really, really appreciate your time today. If you want to connect with Heather on social and online, you can check out heatherparady.com, or you can check her out heather.parady on Facebook and Heather Parady on LinkedIn with the forward extension. So please do that. Heather, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know how valuable that is. It's one of the, it's the ultimate sacrifice, isn't it? Investing time, energy, and then money comes afterwards. But I really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. It's been immense. Thank you.
It was an honor, Mike. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. So for the listeners, I hope you got some value out of that. As always, we appreciate you tuning into the show and continuing your growth engine journey and development and moving forward in life. And as always, get in the game, go do the hustle, and go make it happen. And we'll see you on another Open Mic podcast real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.